Salams from the People's Dispatch Studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhantani. You're watching Daily Debrief, where we try to take you behind the headlines on some of the most important news stories from around the world. Today we're talking about Ukraine and NATO. We're talking about the rampaging Omicron virus strain in Europe, and we're talking about what impact some of these things are going to have on the African Cup of Nations. First up, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky sought security guarantees from NATO's chief in a meeting on Thursday. NATO's Jens Stoltenberg met with Zelensky at their Brussels headquarters and, while reaffirming a 2008 commitment to grant membership to both Ukraine and Georgia, Stoltenberg neither gave any timelines nor made any military commitments. NewsClick editor-in-chief Prabir Purkayastha joins us on the show now. Prabir, Zelensky on his part went in asking for troops to combat this supposed Russian build-up, etc., etc. All he got was a press conference. What do you sort of make of this, underlying, it's on the face of it, there's no escalation of things, but there's an underlying frightening premise that takes us back to Cold War era brinkmanship.
This has to be seen in the context of the discussions that have taken place with President Biden and President Putin, in which Ukraine was a discussion on, and NATO's expansion was discussion on the table. And subsequently we had also President Putin meeting President Xi, and they also had a discussion about how they look at the world.
Yeah.
So we've had two very important backdrops, so to say, to this particular press conference that we are talking about. And it does appear that the Biden-Putin discussions, whatever it might have been, have not resolved the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue, according to Russia, is NATO's continuous eastward march. And in this case, marching right up to the border of Russia.
Right.
And particularly as the Donbas region has had a civil war, has fought for autonomy, at least within Ukraine, and the Minsk Accords had agreed that there will be autonomy given to Donbas, there will be discussion that will take place with the central government of Ukraine, and within the Ukrainian sovereignty, certain degree of autonomy would be given to the Donbas region. No discussions have taken place, and the guarantor to the Minsk Accord, both Germany and France, haven't moved an inch on that either publicly, either to pressurize or to bring the two sides together. Now, it is in that context President Putin has said, if NATO troops come and borders of Ukraine, and also missiles as well as nuclear missiles come to the border of Ukraine, this is a red line. Now, Stoltenberg may say what he wants, that 30 countries of the NATO will decide who is to be a member. It's been Ukraine and NATO members, nobody else. Point is, there was a near world war, as we remember, when missiles were put on Cuba. And if you go back a little further, you will see also missiles put in Turkey against Soviet Union, which led to also Soviet Union putting missiles in Cuba. Now, all that brinkmanship did take place, and nobody argued at that point whether it is correct or incorrect in international law to do this. The point is, these are nuclear weapons. These are missiles on the border of a country, and you cannot argue that strategically that other country which is threatened by such missiles has no opinion on this, and it has to take whatever it gets. So therefore, Russia's argument that if you put missile batteries on us, we have an opinion, I don't think can be disregarded in the particular context where NATO supposedly has no enemy. You see, NATO was originally a pact. If you see the conditions of the pact, it was essentially the United States giving guarantees to the European nations against the Soviet Union. That's what it really meant. And therefore, it was bolstering the European Union, what is today the European Union, at that time the European countries. Those countries was being protected with the nuclear umbrella from the United States and nuclear troops being positioned there. Now, once the Soviet Union fell and the socialist bloc really dissolved, that question, who is the NATO against, has never been clarified. It still continues to be a military pact, and it has now taken on the worldwide policeman role. They can intervene in any part of the world. But it still remains primarily a bloc, a military bloc against Russia. And that's the way Russia sees it, and that's what President Putin has said time and again.
Right.
So given that, I think this issue is the central issue that is not being resolved and threatens peace in the region and to the world, because these are nuclear weapons.
Yeah. And how is this sort of eastward push and relentless sort of eastward push actually fueling a new nuclear arms race?
You see, the issue that is critical here is what is the time a country gets to retaliate if there is a first strike against it.
Right.
Otherwise, and this is the whole logic of the nuclear weapons, which were continuously escalating. Before a set of treaties were worked out to stop this mad arms race, which is that if I launch weapons against you and take out, say, 90% of your weapons,
Yeah.
then when you retaliate, you have only 10% left. Now that 10%, if I'm able to stop with my missile shield, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Then I have wiped your military power out and I have got complete dominance. This is the winnable nuclear war theory.
Right.
And the mutual assured destruction came into existence, saying that this is madness, because all it means is then you start increasing the number of nuclear weapons to say that 10% is such that you will not be able to take out the retaliatory strike. Now that period we thought we had left behind, except for the fact that the United States has pulled out of a number of those agreements. And the key one in this particular case is what is called the intermediate range missiles. And because US has pulled out of it, it means now Europe is under threat from both sides. That you can put intermediate range missiles at the border of Russia, strike at Russia, take out its weapons. And it is true that NATO batteries in the borders, where in the Baltics, Romania, Poland, all of these places have that ability. Ukraine makes it even closer.
Right.
So that's where the battle really is. That if you accept this, then the response from the Russian side would also be then to go on the same path, put more missiles. But they are not interested in striking against Europe. Their target would then be United States. And therefore, that is really ratcheting up the global weapons race. So Russia's response has been therefore hypersonic missiles, development of hypersonic missiles, a new range of missiles, and saying that, okay, if you do this, then the nuclear arms race is going to take a different path. And is that something which the world is interested in, is the issue. And I do think that this kind of brinkmanship is really not mutual assured destruction, but destruction of everybody on the globe. And it's unfortunate that this has become apparently an issue only between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States, as it is shaping up to be. And the entire global discourse has sort of taken a backseat in this.
But with the other part of, and the final question on this subject, the narrative being built is that all is well in the Ukraine. But it's one of only two countries, the other of course being the United States, to have voted against a UN resolution on fascism. So all is clearly not that hunky-dory.
Well, that has been the other part of the so-called Euromaidan revolution, that when the duly elected president of Ukraine was thrown out, the powers that took over from him through the Maidan so-called revolution were which contained sections of those who lauded the Nazi Germany's march towards Russia. They were extremely anti-Russian, and they also were strongly very anti-Jewish. So all this anti-Semitic. So all of this is the backdrop, and a lot of those brigades who are now being lauded, who also fought in Donbass, are ones who show openly Nazi symbols. So that's all very visible. It's also true the Russian ethnicity is not only being discriminated against, the language is now being slowly abolished from government. 50% or more of Ukrainians use Russian as their first language. Probably those who claim Russian ethnicity will be about 1/3 of Ukrainian population. They're slowly being pushed out because language is not supposed to be used. Universities, schools are not supposed to be using Russian, and also mainstream television and newspapers are also being slowly banned from using Russian, or there's under various pretexts, the licenses, etc., being taken away.
Right.
So there is a discrimination against Russian ethnicity and language. And at the same time, as you said, Ukraine and the United States are the only two countries who voted against a resolution condemning fascism and Nazi Germany, or the Nazi past, so to say.
Yeah.
So this is also showing that there is a certain politics in Ukraine which is very disturbing. And the fact that this is the dominant politics in Ukraine today is something which cannot be denied that easily. And that's why when the Russian sections in Ukraine, which I said are considerable in number, are not wanting to be under the central government without a certain degree of autonomy, one can understand, because that's what the Donbas region's civil war was really about.
All about. Yeah.
So I think wishing that away off the table and making it Ukraine versus Russia is to actually see whether NATO can put its missile batteries right on the border of Russia. And that is something why Russia is responding in a certain way, because they feel that Ukrainian forces are poised to enter Donbas. Right. Now, this is something that we cannot know. Who is the first party to move? Is it Ukrainian central forces? Is it Russians who put now forces at the border? So this is something which cannot be resolved by looking at, he did it first.
Yeah.
It has to be resolved by looking at the central issues arising out of this and seeing whether it can be addressed. And Russia has said, well, Minsk Accords, that's what everybody agreed to. Why are we not implementing it?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Prabir. I will ask you to stay on for the next story as well, because that's the subject that you've also been covering closely. We are talking, of course, about the record number of daily coronavirus cases from the United Kingdom for the second day running, with 88,376 infections confirmed on Thursday. Meanwhile, the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday that Omicron is expected to be the dominant virus strain in the 27-nation bloc by mid-January. Prabir, like I was saying earlier, you've been, of course, covering and sort of writing about this subject from the beginning. What exactly is going on in Europe currently, and what makes this strain worrisome?
Well, it is worrisome and not so worrisome, possibly. We don't know as yet, early days yet. But two separate issues, really. One is the speed at which Omicron is moving. And it should be seen as a consequence of two things. One is the fact that almost all the kind of constraints which are there on people meeting each other, gathering in open spaces, gathering in pubs, in restaurants, in various other closed spaces, that is one reason why you could get a resurgence of COVID-19 again. But in this particular case, because Britain, UK is so well vaccinated, it's one of the countries with the highest number of vaccinations, that even after 2 doses, the speed at which this infection has proceeded seems to indicate that there is a degree of there is a degree of vaccine escape that this particular variant has, which is what we saw in South Africa, which is what now we are seeing in other parts of Europe as well. UK is not the only one which is seeing the dominance of Omicron. I think now already the majority of cases in UK are Omicron, and this is also true for a couple of other European countries.
Right.
Now, given that this is certainly, as I said, the Omicron variant proving to be far more easy to infect others. That seems to be also borne out by the small study which has been done. Again, no reason to believe that this study should immediately cause us to have panic attacks.
Right.
But the fact is that it seems to show that the upper respiratory tract, that seems to be the Omicron seems to be able to infect it 70 times more effectively than Delta variant.
Right.
But in the lung, it seems to slow down significantly, and it's only 1/10 the speed at which it infects the lung, which would possibly indicate what the South African preliminary data shows, that more numbers, yes, but less number of serious cases.
Right.
But all these calculations go out of the window for two reasons. One is serious cases don't take place immediately. There is a time lag of 2 to 3 weeks before you see the serious cases. Second is, if the number of cases becomes 10 times more, say, just for argument's sake, while the infection seriousness is 1/10, then you get the same numbers as you would get. And if you see the current peak in UK, for example, is well beyond what the earlier peak of Delta was. So already they are about 30,000 more than the earlier peak of Delta, with 87,000, 88,000 that they have reached now. And I think every day we are seeing significant rise over there. So given that, they are saying that it's possible that we'll see 500,000 cases in about 2 to 3 weeks, or maybe even more. So if you do that, then can the NHS, the public health system over there, infrastructure, can it handle it? And does it mean that therefore you will get the same number of deaths that you have already got earlier in the Delta peak? These are the questions in front of us. Let's take UK as only a test case. And it is something which you are going to see in different countries. Already in India, for example, you can see certain cities, the numbers are starting to rise. And of course, it will affect the cities first. Like in UK, it has affected London the most. And that's the one where you expect the South Africa-UK connection to really play. So this is the same thing that you are likely to see other cities also. So you can expect Europe and the United States to follow, because these are again closely connected to UK, and then of course rest of the world, because it's very clear that the virus is going to spread worldwide because we are globally connected. And that's something that we have to understand, that we have to stop the infections worldwide, that no country can by itself survive the infections. And it will only help the pharmaceutical companies and of course the vaccine makers, because they will see it as a perennial source of money, of profits, while for us is a perennial source of the epidemic and disease. These are contradictory aims. So society needs to resolve which side it wants to be, on the side of pharmaceutical and vaccine companies, or on the side of the people, in which case you need to really step up all these, make vaccines available globally, cheaply, make it available to people as fast as we can. And of course, now that we have some medicines which work against the virus as well, which now recently our armory on that has increased. Both the Pfizer medicine is there, and Merck is there, and we have of course the earlier ones as well. So all of this, if we put together now, it's possible to address it at root, which is address the people and try to stop the pandemic, instead of doing firefighting when outbursts like this take place.
And by which time things are already
out of control.
We were listening to Dr. Tedros, for example, sort of addressing all of us, saying once again that it's important to not forget the basics of hand washing, mask wearing, physical distancing, etc., etc. But at a policy level, of course, you mentioned vaccines and making those available, and that's the most urgent need. What do you also expect at a policy level for particularly governments in the north to be doing to sort of help combat this situation?
You know, one thing is to make medicines and vaccines available at a much greater level than we see till now. And we have seen the speed at which vaccine production has been ramped up. Of course, the Chinese still produce a very significant amount of the vaccines in the world, which is not so noticeable because we tend to focus on Moderna, Pfizer and so on, and AstraZeneca and so on. But they are also producing, they have ramped up production significantly as well. But if you take all the vaccine makers in the world today and share the ability to make vaccines globally, then what we are seeing, about 10 billion vaccine doses, 11 billion vaccine doses in 2021, we can double it easily in the first 6 months of 2022. We can provide vaccines for everybody, as well as booster doses to those who may require it. So that's not a difficult task as it appeared in 2020 or early 2021. We have already come this far. Extending it is a much simpler problem than doing it from scratch, which is what we have done. So I see no reason why this should not be attempted. And the latest drugs, antiviral drugs that are concerned, they are pills. They are not injectables, which are harder. And they're pills which are also small molecules. So they're very easy to replicate, manufacture on a wide scale. So what prevents it is really the will of the people to break the patents, make it available on a world scale, and of course of the rich countries forcing all those who have developed the vaccines and the drugs to share it to the rest of the world, at least for next 3, 4, 5 years.
Yep.
And don't forget, all of this have come from public domain science.
Absolutely.
Pfizer is not Pfizer vaccine, it's BioNTech. BioNTech, the money for the research or the development of the vaccine came from German government. In the case of Moderna, it came from really the US government. They funded it, as well as the National Institute of Health labs there provided the vital breakthroughs.
Right.
So all of it is from public domain science. But because of the nature of these states and governments, they've allowed it to be privatized. So public money, but private gains. This is the model that is being followed. I think that is something that we have to break, at least for pandemic and for humanity, if not for anything else.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Prabir. And finally, continuing with the COVID-19 related stories, the English Premier League, among the most popular sports league in the world, has postponed at least 5 games this weekend. And several clubs are reportedly pushing for the league to be completely shut down till at least the new year. Brentford head coach Thomas Frank, for example, confirmed that his club has recorded 13 positive cases in the last round of testing. At the same time, the European Club Association has written to FIFA asking it to intervene on its behalf and restrict Europe-based players from participating in the Africa Cup of Nations, which is set to kick off in Cameroon. Leslie, going by the logic also of what Prabir was saying a little bit earlier and how Omicron is sort of spreading rapidly through Europe, shouldn't African football administrators be saying they don't want Europe-based players to come in so that Africa doesn't face this new viral strain?
Yeah, exactly. So it should apply in the reverse order as well. But as things go in sport, in football, we know the big clubs in Europe and the kind of money that they put in and kind of money that they put in into the football economy, which has an indirect impact in the African countries as well. That they will have a larger say in these things, and they have already taken that high ground where we say that the association that you mentioned, they have written to FIFA saying that the
they're not confident
enough that with the protocols that will be in place. They are worried about the safety of their prized assets, which is their players, forgetting the fact that these players probably have a larger emotional connect and investment in playing for their country. It is, because Africa Cup of Nations is a big deal. I have had discussions with Egyptian players, footballers, as well as players, squash players specifically speaking, and some footballers as well. And Egypt never makes it to the World Cup, but they always end up fighting for the title in the Continental Cup, in the African Cup of Nations, and it's a huge achievement for them. For the fans, that is enough. Not the World Cup, but not a presence in the World Cup, but winning their Continental Cup. And the same applies to all the regional countries at that. And beyond that, of course, when we look at Cameroon organizing the tournament, there are a lot of things at stake for them as well. Having said that, the call should be taken as to how this has to be addressed by the African Confederation, because the way I see it, nothing has come out which is inspiring as far as a plan is concerned. So they're going ahead with the tournament, but when these kind of rumors and fears and all come from Europe, probably they should come out and express that these are the things that we have kept in place. This is our plan, and we are setting up a foolproof system, which can be trusted by anybody. It's as good as anyone, because obviously the protocols that are put in place, it's from the experience gained from the last 2 years organizing sport. And if at all some faltering is happening, it's happening in Europe, I would say, because they have opened up the stadiums.
Yeah.
I mean, compare that to India, for instance.
I was going to say, it's undeniable hypocrisy. You're saying that XYZ, you're not sure about how they can implement COVID protocols. But on the other hand, the most visible signs of it, you have small stadiums packed to the brim, no masks, no physical distancing, and a history of super spreader events.
Yeah, let's not forget Game Zero, which happened in February 2020 in Italy, the Champions League match, the fateful Champions League match, Atlanta versus Valencia and happening in Milan, San Siro. That directly caused the spike in the cases when Italy was untouched till then, and then Bergamo, the region where Atlanta is from, fans who had travelled to Milan, they took back the virus, and then it became the epicenter of the pandemic in Italy. While some fans who came from Spain, they went back with the virus again, and the second case ever in Valencia happened to be a journalist who covered the match, and from there it escalated, and it was it has been described as a biological time bomb where and Europe seems to have forgotten that when in the haste to open up things. And see, that's again a problem with European countries and European football organizers or sport organizers, that they can't look beyond themselves and see there are other means to bypass, still hold sport, still hold the tournament, still have all the stakeholders happy and keep things rolling.
And also look after what they are saying is a key concern, which is the well-being of the players themselves.
That concern, I still doubt that, because obviously they are opening them to an open stadium and then saying the other things as well. And so look beyond, look to India, for instance. Sport has been organized here in closed biobubbles, and or look at the Olympics also in a larger sense, because how was Olympics organized, and the kind of convergence that happened of people, of the factors that anything could have gone wrong there, and very minimal things went wrong, cases wise, I mean. So lessons have been learned, and I am sure at a continental level, when a tournament is organized in Africa, they would have things in place. They would not want some incidents to happen which would completely tarnish their reputation, as well as probably push back football by many years in that country. A lot of things at stake. So why is this assumption? I don't understand. Is it? I mean, it's hard to explain the logic behind Europe coming out now. Maybe they should, like you mentioned that before we started this conversation, that English clubs are trying to shut shop for the time being, bracing for the impact from the Omicron virus, Omicron variant, and maybe entire Europe should worry about their home first rather than worry about Africa.
All right. Thanks, Leslie. We'll of course keep you updated on that, but as of now, clear signs from Cameroon that all of those things about the tournament being postponed was all just rumor, and the first game of the Africa Cup of Nations will be played on January 9, 2022. That's all we have on the show for today. From Leslie, myself and the entire People's Dispatch team, thank you for watching. You can get more on these stories from our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and please follow us on all social media platforms. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow for our final show of the week. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.